The rain had been tapping at the kitchen window for an hour when I heard them at the gate. My hands were still damp from washing the single plate, the one with the chip on the rim that I'd meant to throw away for years but never did. The kettle had just ticked itself cool on the stove, and bread steam still hung in the air like a ghost of dinner. "Don't bother coming to the gate, Grandma, we'll text you." The words came through the screen door, casual as a weather report. My son's voice, talking to his wife. About me. I was already there, dish towel in hand, 3 steps from the porch where they stood fumbling with the latch. I wasn't late. I was unseen. The sentence landed clean as a blade between my ribs. Not cruel, exactly. Just efficient. The way you'd arrange a delivery or cancel a subscription. Don't bother. We'll text you. I stood there in my own kitchen, watching their shadows move against the porch light. The metal latch rattled, it always stuck in the rain. They'd forgotten I'd shown them the trick with lifting and pushing at the same time. Forgotten, or never really noticed. I could have stepped forward. Could have opened the door and said, "I'm right here." Could have made it a joke, silly Grandma, always underfoot. But something held me still. Maybe it was the bread cooling on the counter, made with my mother's recipe, the one they'd asked for last Christmas but never used. Maybe it was the rain, patient and steady, teaching the garden how to wait. I didn't correct them. I corrected the story I'd been telling myself. The one where being useful meant being loved. Standing at every gate, ready with keys and casseroles and folded 20s, would keep me woven into the fabric of their days. Where don't bother was just a figure of speech, not a diagnosis of my place in their lives. They managed the latch eventually. I heard the car door slam, the engine fade into the rain. The kitchen settled back into its evening quiet, just me and the cooling kettle and the truth, sitting there plain as the plate in the sink. I set the dish towel on the counter, smoothing it flat. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought revelations were supposed to shake you, but this one made me still. Still and clear, like water after the silt settles. In 90 days, things would be different. Not because of anger, I wasn't angry. I was finished with one version of the story and ready to write another. In 90 days, locks would click with new precision. Bank accounts would clarify themselves like morning fog lifting. A train would carry me toward work, and my hands remembered how to do work that needed me for more than just showing up at gates. There would be a bench in a library garden, a small brass plate with my name etched thin as thread. A listening bench, they'd call it. A place for stories to rest. The rule would be simple: ring the bell, be kind, speak plainly. Come as guests, not as owners of my time. Not revenge. Repair. But first, there was tonight. There was the sink and the sentence still echoing in the air. There was a decision forming like bread dough, needing time to rise. I turned on the tap and let the water run cold over my wrists. Through the window, the garden held its secrets. Marigold seeds waited in a packet by the door. The calendar on the wall showed empty squares, but I could already see them filling: locksmith, banker, train schedule, letter to write. Each square is a small choice. Each choice was a door that opened inward first. The water cooled my hands, and I began. After they left, I washed that single plate until the water turned cold and my fingertips pruned like raisins. The word bother kept floating up like a bubble that wouldn't pop. Don't bother. As if my presence at my own gate was an inconvenience to file away. I dried the plate slowly, feeling its weight. How many meals had I served on it? How many times had I stood at their door with covered dishes, waiting to be let in? The math of it made me tired. Not the good tired that comes from honest work, but the hollow tired of pouring water into a cup with no bottom. The kitchen held its breath around me. On the wall, my mother's clock ticked patiently like a heartbeat. She'd have had words for this moment, probably something about backbone and knowing your worth. But she'd been gone 10 years, and I'd spent most of them trying to earn my place at tables that were never quite set for me. I hung the dish towel on its hook and really looked at my kitchen. The spice rack I'd alphabetized. The drawer where I kept birthday cards that I bought months in advance. The folder of recipes copied out in my careful hand, for when you want to make this yourself, hopefully written on the cover. Evidence of a woman who'd confused being useful with being loved. Memory has a way of lining up witnesses once you see the pattern. Last month, oh, you're here early. The month before, we've already eaten, but thanks. Christmas, we'll just do something small this year, you understand. Each dismissal is small enough to swallow, bitter enough to accumulate. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat. Not dramatically. Just sat. The rain kept its rhythm on the roof, and I matched my breathing to it. In and out. No rush. No one was waiting for me to hurry up and fix something, fetch something, forget something. I would not raise my voice. I would raise my standards. The thought arrived fully formed, like it had been waiting in the wings. Not a tantrum, not a scene. Just a quiet adjustment of terms. I'd been living by their convenience, shape-shifting to fit whatever container they offered. Time to remember my own shape. I stood and walked to the hallway closet where I kept the household binder. Lilac tab, soft with hues. Inside, insurance papers, appliance manuals, the careful architecture of a life maintained. I pulled down a legal pad and uncapped my good pen. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "Things I no longer owe." The pen moved steadily as rain. Permission to exist in my own home. Apologies for having boundaries. My mother's recipes to people who won't taste them. Access without acknowledgement. Explanations for choosing peace. I turned to a fresh page, things I still offer. Tea when you call first. Stories when you sit to listen. Rides when you ask with kindness. Time when it's treated as a gift, not given. Love that knows its own worth. The list sat there, plain as bread. Not weapons. Maps. I reached for the phone and dialed the locksmith's number from the yellow pages. His voice was gruff but kind, the sort of man who'd changed 1,000 locks for 1,000 reasons and didn't need to know mine. Tomorrow morning? I asked. 8 sharp, he said. Deadbolts or regular? Deadbolts, I said. Good ones. Next call, the bank. The after-hours line put me through to someone who could schedule an appointment. Tuesday, 10 o'clock. Time to talk about trusts and beneficiaries and the kind of clarity that comes with proper documentation. The train schedule was harder to find, I hadn't looked at it in years. But there it was online, routes to the coast where the museum needed part-time help cataloging letters. 2 days a week, they'd said in the posting. Experience preferred. Patience required. I had both in abundance. Last, I pulled down the seed packet from beside the door. Marigolds. Hardy flowers that knew how to mark a border while still blooming bright. Tomorrow, after the locks were changed, I'd plant them along the property line. Not a fence. A declaration. I closed the binder and set it on the table. The kitchen had shifted while I worked, or maybe I had. Either way, the space felt more mine than it had an hour ago. The bread had cooled completely now, and I cut myself a thick slice, buttered it properly, and ate it standing at the counter like a woman who didn't need anyone's permission to enjoy her own baking. Outside, the rain was easing into mist. The porch light caught each drop like a promise. Tomorrow would come with its van and its locksmith and its small, necessary revolutions. But tonight, there was just me and my lists and my kitchen and the quiet certainty that I was not too old to choose a different story. I turned off the lights and headed to bed. On the way, I stopped at the coat hook by the door. My good coat hung there, the one I saved for occasions. I touched its sleeve, a promise to myself. Soon, I'd wear it on a train to somewhere that needed me for more than just my availability. Not dramatic. Accurate. The locksmith arrived at 8 sharp, just as promised. His van rumbled in the driveway like a declaration. I met him at the door with coffee, black, 2 sugars, the way working people take it when there's work to be done. All of them? He asked, surveying the doors. All of them, I confirmed. He nodded and set to work. The house held its breath while metal sang against metal, old tumblers giving way to new. I watched from the kitchen table, the lilac-tabbed binder open before me, making notes. Front door, brass deadbolt. Back door, matching. Side entrance, same. Each lock a sentence in a conversation I was having with myself about worth and welcome. The locksmith worked with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of practice. No wasted motion, no unnecessary chatter. Just the steady rhythm of removal and replacement, the small violence of necessary change. Trouble? He asked finally, not looking up from his work. Prevention, I said. He grunted approval and kept working. When he finished, he laid out the new keys on my kitchen table like a hand of cards. 6 keys total, 2 for each lock. The brass caught the morning light, winking with possibility. Who gets the spares? He asked. I'd thought about this. In the old story, I'd have made copies for everyone, distributed them like party favors. Keys for my son, his wife, their teenagers, and anyone who might possibly need to drop by unannounced. But that was the old story. I'll keep them, I said, and pulled out a small ceramic dish, the one painted with violets that had been my mother's. I placed 2 keys in it, set it on the shelf by the door where anyone coming in would see it. Not hidden. Not handed out. Just there, waiting for the right moment and the right request. The locksmith packed up his tools. I paid him in cash, exact change counted out from the envelope I'd prepared. He paused at the door, looking back at the ceramic dish with its brass occupants. Good locks, he said. But better to have good boundaries. Yes, I said. That's the idea. After he left, I stood in my newly secured home and felt the difference. Not imprisoned, protected. Not angry, clear. I walked from room to room, testing each lock, feeling the satisfying click of tumblers falling into place. This is what agency sounds like, small and metallic and certain. I made a second cup of tea and sat down to write the next part. On a fresh page, I drafted what I would tell the neighbors. New locks installed today. In case of emergency, please call first. If no answer, the spare key is in the violet dish, visible from the front window. Use with care and return immediately. Simple. Clear. No explanations needed. For the family, the message would be different. New locks for home security. Please call before visiting. I'll be happy to let you in. I copied the neighbor note 3 times, for Mrs. Chen next door, the Patel family across the street, and young Marcus, who mowed lawns and noticed things. These I would deliver by hand, with banana bread, because boundaries and kindness were not opposites. They were dance partners. The family message would wait for the right moment. No rush. The locks would speak first, and words would follow when needed. I stood and stretched, feeling my spine straighten. Through the window, the garden waited in morning light. Time to plant those marigolds. I gathered the seed packet, my gardening gloves, and the small trowel that fit my hand perfectly. Outside, the air smelled of rain-washed earth and possibility. I knelt at the property line, where grass met sidewalk, and began to dig. Each hole precise, each seed placed with intention. Not a wall. A welcome that knew its own terms. As I worked, Mrs. Chen appeared on her porch, watching. I waved, and she came over, careful of the fresh-turned earth. New flowers? She asked. New boundaries, I said, and somehow she understood. She nodded, the way women do when they recognize another woman choosing herself. Good, she said. About time. We worked in companionable silence, her pointing out the best spots for sun, me digging and planting. When we finished, a bright line of potential stretched along the edge of my world. In a few weeks, they'd bloom orange and gold, cheerful guards at the gate. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees, and looked at what we'd done. Mrs. Chen touched my shoulder lightly. The keys, she said. I'll keep your number close. But I won't use it unless the house is on fire. Or flooding, I added, and we both smiled. She took her banana bread and her copy of the note, and I watched her walk back to her own kingdom, where she, too, knew the value of a door that locked and a neighbor who understood. The morning was still young. The bank appointment wasn't until Tuesday, but there were other calls to make. I went inside, washed the earth from my hands, and picked up the phone. Coastal Museum, how may I direct your call? The Archives Department, please. About the part-time position. The phone clicked and hummed, and then a voice like worn velvet said, Archives, this is Helen. I told her my name, my experience with letters and catalogs, and my availability starting next month. She asked about my comfort with detailed work, with silence, with stories that weren't mine. I've spent 60 years practicing, I said, and she laughed, not unkind, but knowing. Can you come on Thursday? We'll show you the collection, see if it suits. Yes, I said. Thursday's perfect. I hung up and made a note in the calendar square. Thursday, museum. Train schedule. Good coat. The phone rang almost immediately. My son's number is on the caller ID. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. The locks, he said without preamble. Mom, what's going on? I'd expected this call, but not so soon. The locksmith's van must have been noticed. Small neighborhood, watchful eyes. Good morning to you, too, I said, mild as milk. Mom. That tone, half scolding, half confused. Why did you change the locks? Security, I said. The old ones were wearing out. Without telling us? There it was, the assumption. That my house was somehow theirs, that changes required committee approval. I'm telling you now, I said. Would you like to come by for tea? I'll be home after 2. We have a key, he said. You had a key, I corrected gently. Call first, and I'll be happy to let you in. The silence stretched like taffy. I could hear his wife in the background, her voice sharp with questions he couldn't answer. Is this about last night? He asked finally. So he did remember. Interesting. This is about today, I said. And tomorrow. And having a door that opens when I choose to open it. Mom, you're being careful, I finished. Yes. I am. Tease at 2 if you'd like to come. I hung up before he could argue. Not rudely, just completely. The phone rang again immediately, but I didn't answer. Boundaries needed practice, and this was mine. Instead, I pulled out the legal pad again and began drafting another list. This one for the bank. Living trust. Independent co-trustee. Beneficiaries are clear but not controlling. Small allocation for the library bench. Monthly autopay for utilities. New passwords, mine alone. Each item has a small independence. Each decision was a thread in the new pattern I was weaving. The phone stopped ringing. The house settled into quiet. I made myself a proper lunch, soup and crackers, and an apple sliced thin, the way I liked it. Ate at the table with a book propped open, reading about women who'd sailed alone across oceans. Their boats were small but seaworthy. They knew about storms and solitude and the difference between loneliness and being alone. At 1:30, I cleared the dishes and set the kettle to heat. If they came, there would be tea. If they didn't, I'd drink it myself and count that a different kind of victory. At 2:05, the doorbell rang. I didn't hurry. Walked steadily to the door and looked through the peephole. My son stood there, hands in pockets. His wife waited by the car, arms crossed. I opened the door, but not the screen. "You rang," I said, and almost smiled at the small joke of it. "Can we come in?" "Of course." I unlatched the screen and stepped aside. "Susan's welcome too." He looked back at the car, but she shook her head. Her choice. I wouldn't chase it. In the kitchen, I poured tea while he sat at the table, looking around like he'd never seen the room before. Maybe he hadn't, not really. When you assume access, you stop noticing details. "The locks," he started again. "Are new," I agreed, setting his cup before him. "Sugar's in the bowl." He added 2 spoons, stirring longer than necessary. I waited. I'd gotten good at waiting. "Mom, if this is about money." "It's not," I said. "Then what?" I considered my words like ingredients, measuring carefully. "It's about asking before entering. Call before coming. Treating my home like a place that belongs to someone. Basic courtesy." "We're family," he said, as if that explained everything. "Yes," I said. "Which is why I expect better." He flinched at that, tea sloshing slightly. I handed him a napkin. "You said don't bother coming to the gate," I continued, voice steady as my mother's clock. I was already there. Already waiting. And I realized I'd been waiting at too many gates, holding too many keys that weren't mine, making myself convenient instead of valued. We didn't mean." "I know," I said. "That's the problem. You didn't mean anything by it. I've become background noise in my own life." He stared into his tea like it might hold answers. Outside, Susan leaned against the car, checking her phone. The marigolds we'd planted caught the afternoon sun, small green shoots just breaking soil. "So what now?" he asked. I pulled out the note I'd written and slid it across the table. "Now you call first. Now you visit instead of dropping by. Now we try something new." He read it, jaw working. "This feels like punishment." "It's not," I said. "It's a possibility. I'm not closing doors. I'm asking you to knock." He finished his tea in silence, then stood. At the door, he paused. "The spare key?" "Is where it needs to be," I said. "For emergencies. Real ones." He left without asking for a copy. Progress, perhaps. Or just the first round of a longer negotiation. Either way, I'd said what needed saying. I watched their car pull away, then went to water the marigolds. Tuesday morning arrived crisp and clear. I wore my good coat to the bank, the weight of it across my shoulders like armor. The building smelled of marble and money, old paper and new ambitions. I'd made an appointment with Ms. Rodriguez, who specialized in trusts and estates. She was younger than I'd expected, with serious eyes and a notepad ready. We sat in her glass office while the city hummed beyond the windows. "How can I help you today?" she asked. "I need to organize my assets," I said. Clearly. Independently. With thought for the future but control in the present. She smiled slightly. "That's the best description of a living trust I've heard in months." We spent 2 hours mapping my financial landscape. The house was paid off 20 years ago. The savings are modest but sufficient. The small investment account my mother had started had grown slowly over the decades. Each account examined, each beneficiary discussed. "I want an independent co-trustee," I said. "Someone neutral. Professional." She nodded, making notes. "We can arrange that. It prevents family disputes and ensures your wishes are followed exactly. And I want to designate a small amount, maybe 5,000, for a community project. A bench at the library. Something that listens. She looked up at that. A memorial bench? A living bench, I corrected. Well, I'm still here to see it used. We worked through the details. Passwords changed, all of them. Autopay established for utilities. A new account for my museum wages, when they started. Everything is clean and clear and mine to manage. The family? She asked carefully, pen poised. Will inherit according to the trust, I said. But they won't control it while I'm living. And they won't have access to the accounts. Good, she said, surprising me. You'd be amazed how many people give away their financial independence trying to buy love. Not anymore, I said. She printed documents, and I signed with my steady hand. Each signature is a small declaration of independence. When we finished, she handed me a folder, everything organized and official. The co-trustee will be assigned within the week, she said. You'll have full transparency, full control, but also protection if you ever need it. I stood, gathered my things. At the door, she called after me. Mrs. That bench idea. I think it's wonderful. I nodded and left, folder tucked under my arm like a diploma from the University of Selfhood. Outside, the city sparkled with Tuesday purpose. I stopped at a cafe, ordered lunch at the counter, and ate while watching people hurry past. A woman my age sat alone at the next table, reading a book and smiling at private jokes. We caught each other's eye, nodded the recognition of women who'd learned to enjoy their own company. The phone rang that evening while I was sorting papers. Susan's number this time. We need to talk, she said without greeting. I'm listening, I said, though I kept working, filing the bank documents in their proper place. This is ridiculous. The locks, the bank, oh yes, we know about the bank. This whole production. What are you trying to prove? I considered this. Nothing. Then why? Because I spent 60 years proving myself to everyone else. Now I'm just living. By shutting us out? By letting you in when invited, I corrected. There's a difference. She made a sound of frustration. The kids are confused. Their grandmother suddenly acting like someone with boundaries? I suggested. Perhaps that's a good lesson. Don't interrupt me, she snapped. Then don't call me ridiculous in my own home, I replied, still calm. Respect goes both ways, Susan. Even through phone lines. The silence stretched. I filed another paper, the whisper of it sliding into place oddly satisfying. Fine, she said finally. What do you want? I want you to ring the doorbell, I said. I want you to call before coming. I want conversations instead of assumptions. I want to be a person in your life, not a convenience. We never said you were. No, I agreed. You never said much of anything. That was the problem. She hung up. I finished filing, then made myself a cup of chamomile tea. The house felt peaceful around me, like it too was learning this new rhythm of chosen solitude and intentional welcome. Thursday came with morning fog that turned the world soft at the edges. I dressed carefully, good slacks, comfortable shoes, the kind of blouse that said I took work seriously but wouldn't fuss about dust. The train schedule tucked in my purse promised departure at 9:17. At the station, I bought my ticket from a machine that remembered simpler times. The platform wasn't crowded, just a handful of travelers, each carrying their own purposes. I found a seat by the window and watched the city give way to suburbs, then countryside, then the first glimpse of the ocean. The museum sat on a bluff overlooking the water, all weathered stone and wide windows. I'd been here once before, years ago, on a school trip with my son's class. Then, I'd been watching children, counting heads, making sure everyone stayed together. Now I was here for myself. Helen from Archives met me at the information desk. She was exactly as her voice had suggested, silver-haired, straight-backed, with hands that knew their way around old paper. "Let me show you what we're working with," she said, leading me through quiet halls to a room that smelled of history. The archives were beautiful in their order. Boxes lined the shelves that reached the ceiling. Each box is labeled, dated, and waiting. She pulled one down and set it on the work table. "Letters from the 1890s, she said. "A family that ran the lighthouse. 12 years of correspondence, never catalogued properly. We need someone to read, summarize, and create finding aids. Patient work." I lifted one letter carefully. The paper was thin but not fragile, and the ink faded but was still legible. A woman writing to her sister about storms and supplies, children and chickens, the way light looked on water at different times of day. "I can do this," I said. Helen smiled. "I thought you might. 2 days a week? Tuesdays and Thursdays?" "Perfect." We discussed wages, modest but fair. Hours, flexible within reason. The work itself, detailed, quiet, important in the way small things can be. "When can you start?" "Next Thursday?" I suggested. "I have a few things to arrange first." "Next Thursday," she agreed, and we shook hands like women concluding serious business. The train ride home felt different. I had a job. Not charity work, not volunteering to fill time, but a real position with a paycheck and purpose. I watched the landscape reverse itself, ocean to country to suburb to city, and felt myself expanding to fill the space I'd been given. At home, I marked the calendar. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the foreseeable future, museum. The empty squares didn't look empty anymore. They looked like a possibility. That evening, while making dinner, I heard voices at the gate. Young voices. I looked out to see my granddaughter standing there with a friend, both of them studying the new lock like archaeologists. I opened the door, called out, "You can ring the bell." She looked up, startled, then smiled, the quick, genuine smile that reminded me why I'd started baking cookies in the first place. "Gran. We were just, Mom said you changed everything." "Just the locks," I said. "Come in, both of you. I have lemonade." They followed me to the kitchen, her friend shy but curious. I poured drinks and set out the cookies I'd made that morning. They sat at the table, and I saw my granddaughter notice the changes, the key dish, the papers on the counter, the new sense of order. "Mom's pretty mad," she said carefully. "I know," I said. "Are you?" She considered this, turning her glass in circles on the table. "Not really." "It's your house." "Yes," I said. "It is." "Can I still visit?" "Of course. Ring the bell, and if I'm home, you're welcome." "What if you're not home?" "Then I'm somewhere else, doing something that matters to me." She nodded slowly. "Like what?" I told them about the museum, the letters, and the woman who wrote about lighthouse keeping. Their eyes widened at the idea of reading 100-year-old mail, solving puzzles of faded ink and forgotten stories. "That's so cool," her friend said. "Like being a detective, but for history." "Exactly," I said. They stayed for an hour, talking about school and friends and whether ghosts lived in museums, possibly, we decided, but friendly ones who just wanted their letters read. When they left, my granddaughter hugged me at the door. "I'll ring next time," she promised. "I'll answer," I promised back. The next morning, I woke with purpose. Time to write the letter I'd been composing in my head. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table with good paper and my best pen. "Dear family," I began, then crossed it out. Too formal. I tried again. "To my son and his family." Better. The pen moved steadily across the page. "I've made some changes that I want you to understand. New locks, yes, but more than that. New boundaries, new schedule, new ways of being in the world and with each other. I'm not angry. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm choosing to live the rest of my years with intention instead of assumption. This means call before visiting. Ring the doorbell. Wait to be welcomed in. I've organized my finances with professional help. Everything is clear, legal, and protected. You'll inherit what I choose to leave, but you won't have access while I'm living. I've taken a part-time position at the Coastal Museum. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I won't be available. This work matters to me. I'm creating a life that's mine to live. You're welcome to be part of it, but not to control it. Love isn't ownership. Care isn't control. My door is open to those who knock. My table has room for those who ask to sit. My heart has space for relationships built on respect. I hope you'll choose to know me as I am now, not as you've assumed I'd always be. But that's your choice to make, just as this is mine. With love and clarity. I signed my name and read it over. Direct but not harsh. Clear but not closed. I made 2 copies, one for my files, one to mail. Then I added something. I pressed a marigold between 2 sheets of wax paper, ironed it carefully until it lay flat and bright. I tucked this into the envelope with a letter. Beauty with boundaries. Growth with limits. Everything I was trying to say in one small flower. The post office was quiet on Saturday morning. I bought stamps, sealed the envelope, and dropped it in the box with the satisfying thunk of completed action. No taking it back now. Good. On the way home, I stopped at the garden center. More marigolds, but also herbs for the kitchen window. Basil, thyme, and rosemary, plants that gave when touched but kept their own shape. I bought good soil and new pots, the kind that drained properly. At home, I spent the afternoon repotting, arranging, and creating small ecosystems of green on every windowsill. The house smelled of earth and growth. My hands knew this work, the careful loosening of roots, the settling into new soil, the patient watering that encouraged without drowning. Mrs. Chin appeared at the back door, drawn by the sight of garden activity. I waved her in. She had neighborly privileges that transcended doorbells. Beautiful, she said, touching a basil leaf. You're blooming. Finally, I said, and we both knew I wasn't talking about the plants. She helped me arrange the pots for the best light, sharing wisdom about which herbs liked company and which preferred solitude. We worked in comfortable quiet, 2 women who understood the language of growing things. Your family? She asked eventually. Adjusting, I said. Good. Let them adjust. You've done enough adjusting for one lifetime. When she left, I gave her a pot of thyme and a hug that said more than words. Then I went inside to shower off the dirt and dress for the evening. I had nowhere to go, no one to meet, nothing that needed doing except being present in my own life. The freedom of it felt like floating. I made myself a proper dinner, salmon with herbs from the new pots, salad with lemon, and good bread with real butter. Ate at the table with a book propped open, candle lit because beauty didn't require an audience. Cleaned up without hurry, each dish was washed and dried, and put away with care. The phone didn't ring. The doorbell didn't chime. The evening stretched before me like a gift I'd given myself. Sunday arrived with rain, the kind that settled in for conversation. I spent the morning organizing the museum clothes, comfortable pieces that could handle dust and careful work. Everything clean, pressed, ready. At noon, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole to see my granddaughter standing under an umbrella, alone this time, holding what looked like a shoebox. I opened immediately. Well, this is a nice surprise. I rang, she said, smiling. You did. Coming out of the rain. In the kitchen, she set the box on the table carefully. I brought something. For your new job. Inside, wrapped in tissue, a pair of white cotton gloves, the kind archivists use. A magnifying glass with a carved wooden handle. A packet of index cards and a good mechanical pencil. For the letters, she explained. I looked up what historians use. My throat tightened. These are perfect. Really? Really? Want to see how they work? I got out some of my mother's old letters, showed her how to handle aged paper, how to read faded ink, and how to make notes without damaging the original. She was careful, interested, asking questions about preservation and stories and why old words mattered. Maybe I could help sometime? She suggested. At the museum? I'll ask, I promised. They might have volunteer programs. We spent the afternoon like that, reading pieces of the past, practicing care with fragile things. When she left, I walked her to the door, watched her go down the path between the blooming marigolds. Thanks for ringing, I called after her. Thanks for answering, she called back. Monday morning, I woke to find a response slipped under my door. My son's handwriting, careful as always. Mom. Got your letter. Need time to process. This isn't what we expected. We'll call before coming by. Your son. Not warm, but not cold. Not acceptance, but not rejection. A beginning, perhaps. I filed it with the other papers, evidence of change in motion. The week took shape around my new schedule. Monday for errands and house care. Tuesday at the museum, learning the rhythm of old paper and patient cataloging. Wednesday for the garden and neighbors. Thursday back with the letters, finding my pace. Friday for myself, library, cafe, long walk by the river. Weekend open but not empty, available but not assumed. The museum work suited me. Helen showed me the systems, how to number each letter, create catalog cards, and note damage or special content. I wore my new white gloves and used the magnifying glass when the ink blurred. The lighthouse keeper's wife wrote about ordinary things with extraordinary attention, the way storms changed the color of her children's eyes, how bread rose differently in sea air, the particular loneliness of fog. Take breaks, Helen reminded me. Old letters can be heavy reading. But I didn't find them heavy. I found them honest. Women writing truth to other women across miles and years. I recognized the language, duty wrapped around love, exhaustion dressed as devotion, joy squeezed into margins between tasks. Thursday of the second week, I was deep in a letter about Christmas preparations when someone cleared their throat. I looked up to find a man about my age, holding a box like mine. Sorry to interrupt, he said. Helen said you might know where the 1890s shipping records landed? Third shelf, section B, I said, pointing. Just reorganized them yesterday. Bless you, he said. I'm Tom. Working on the maritime collection. Nice to meet you, I said, and meant it. We worked in companionable quiet after that, occasional questions floating between tables. At lunch, he produced 2 sandwiches from his bag. Always pack extra, he said. Wife's habit. Haven't broken it yet. His wife had been gone 2 years, he told me over tuna and good mustard. The museum work helped, having somewhere to be, something to do with his hands, stories that weren't his to tend. Retirement's trickier than they tell you, he said. Yes, I agreed. All that time and no one needs you to fill it. Exactly. We ate looking out at the ocean, watching boats draw lines on the water. Easy conversation about grown children, changing bodies, the way time sped up even as life slowed down. When lunch ended, we returned to our separate tables, but the room felt less solitary. Same time next week? He asked when we were packing up. I'll bring the sandwiches, I offered. Deal. The train home carried new lightness. Not romance, I was long past needing that particular validation. But friendship, perhaps. Colleagueship. Someone who understood the weight of empty hours and the relief of useful work. At home, I found my son's car in the driveway. He stood by the front door, hands in pockets, studying the marigolds which had burst into full bloom. "You rang?" I asked, walking up the path. "Thought I'd wait," he said. "Didn't want to disturb you if you were napping." "I don't nap," I said. "I work Thursdays." "Right. The museum." I unlocked the door and gestured him in. He followed me to the kitchen, where late afternoon light made everything golden. I put the kettle on, automatic as breathing. "How's the job?" he asked. "Good." "Interesting. They have letters from the 1890s that need cataloging." "Sounds dusty." "Sometimes. Mostly, it sounds like women telling the truth." He shifted in his chair. "Mom, about the letter." "Which part?" I asked, getting down cups. "All of it. The locks, the trust, the boundaries." "What about them?" He sighed. "Susan thinks you're having some kind of breakdown." "And you?" "I think you're angry." I poured water over tea bags, watched the color bloom. I was angry. For about an hour. Then I got clear. Clear about what? About the difference between being family and being furniture. He flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I set his cup before him. "When did you last ask me about my day? My interests? My plans? When did you last see me as anything other than available?" "We've been busy." "For 20 years?" The words sat between us like the letters I'd been reading, truth told plain, without decoration. He stared into his tea like it might offer absolution. "We didn't mean to," he said finally. "I know," I said. "That's why I'm not angry anymore. But I'm also not willing to continue the pattern." "So what do you want?" "I want you to know me," I said. "Not the mother you remember or the grandmother you assume. Now. The woman who catalogs letters and plants marigolds and changed her locks because she finally understood the difference between giving and being taken from." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, the museum really matters to you?" "Yes." "And the locks?" "Matter too." "And us?" "You matter most," I said. "Which is why I won't accept less than a real relationship anymore." He finished his tea, stood to go. At the door, he paused. Could I see the letters sometime? The ones you're working on?" "I'd like that," I said. "Tuesday or Thursday?" "Call first, and I'll arrange it with Helen." He nodded and left. Progress, measured in teacups and careful questions. That evening, I sat with my household binder, updating the lists. Under things I no longer owe, I added, explanations for choosing joy. Under things I still offer, true stories, when asked with care. The phone rang. "Susan. I suppose you're proud of yourself," she started. "Actually, yes," I said. "I am." That stopped her. "He came home talking about letters and museums and wanting to know you better." "What did you say to him?" "The truth. Your truth. The only kind I have." She made a frustrated sound. "This is ridiculous." "You're 72 years old." 73 next month, I corrected. "And still learning." "Learning what?" "That love without respect is just need dressed up nice. That access without acknowledgement is theft. That I'd rather be alone than unseen in a crowd." "You're impossible," she said. "No," I said. "I'm possible." Finally. She hung up. I made myself dinner, ate with the news on low, and went to bed early. Tomorrow was Friday, library day, cafe day, river walk day. My day. The weeks found their rhythm. Museum work deepened as I learned about the collection. Tom and I established our Thursday lunch tradition, swapping sandwiches and stories of letters found. Helen trusted me with more complex cataloging, including a box of photographs that accompanied the lighthouse letters. "You have an eye for detail," she said, watching me match faces to names mentioned in correspondence. "Years of practice," I said. "Just different details now." My granddaughter visited regularly, always ringing, always welcome. She helped plant the herb garden's summer expansion, learned to read Old Cursive, and brought friends to see the cool letter lady her grandmother had become. Each visit was chosen, not assumed. Each goodbye included plans for next time. The family letter achieved its slow work. My son called before coming. Susan remained cool but civil. The grandchildren adapted fastest, teenagers understood boundaries, even if they rolled their eyes at the formality of ringing doorbells. "It's like you're a real person now," my grandson said once, then blushed at his honesty. "I always was," I said. "You just couldn't see me through the assumptions." One Thursday, a month into the new rhythm, I arrived at the museum to find a box on my desk with a note from Helen. "Thought you'd appreciate these. Same family, different generation." Inside, letters from the lighthouse keeper's daughter, grown and moved inland, writing to her own daughter about different kinds of isolation. The circularity of it, mothers and daughters across generations, negotiating distance and closeness, made my chest tight. "Good find?" Tom asked from his table. "Complicated find," I said. "The best kind." That afternoon, sorting through the daughter's letters, I found one that stopped me cold. "Mother writes that I've abandoned her by choosing my own life. But abandonment and autonomy are different words, though they sound alike in her mouth. I love her. I also love the woman I'm becoming without her shadow. Both truths exist. Both hurt. Both heal." I copied the quote carefully onto an index card, filed it with my growing collection of wisdom from women long gone but not lost. When I got home, I found a package on my porch. No delivery truck in sight, but Mrs. Chin waved from her window. She'd accepted it for me. Inside, a leather journal, good quality, with a note in my son's handwriting. "For your museum stories. Or whatever stories you want to tell. Happy early birthday. Your son who's trying to see better." I sat on the porch step and cried a little. Not sad tears, clean ones. The kind that washes windows so light can get through. That night, I wrote in the journal for the first time. Not about family or boundaries or the price of being seen. About the lighthouse keeper's wife and her careful descriptions of bread. About Tom's sandwiches and the way friendship could bloom late. About marigolds and how they mark edges while still opening to the sun. Small stories. True ones. Mine to tell. The birthday came with October light, everything golden and preparing for change. I woke to rain on the roof and the satisfaction of plans made for myself. Museum in the morning, Helen had promised cake at lunch. Dinner at the new restaurant by the river, table for one by the window. Evening at home with a book and a good chocolate I'd hidden from no one but myself. But first, breakfast and the doorbell. I opened the door to find my granddaughter with a bakery box. "Cinnamon rolls," she announced. "Still warm." "Perfect timing," I said. "I just made coffee." We ate at the kitchen table, frosting on our fingers, talking about school and the museum letters and whether 73 was very old. Not really, we decided, just well seasoned. She gave me a card she'd made, covered in pressed flowers from the garden we'd planted. "I'm glad you changed the locks," she said suddenly. "Why's that?" "Because now, when you let me in, I know you want me here. Before, I never knew if we were bothering you." "You weren't," I said, then reconsidered. "Well, sometimes. But I didn't know how to say so." "Now you do." "Now I do." She helped clean up, then walked with me to the train station. "Have a good birthday at work," she said, hugging me goodbye. "Have a good Thursday at school," I replied. The museum had indeed prepared cake, Helen's lemon specialty, tart and sweet in equal measure. The archive volunteers gathered in the break room, singing off-key and sincerely. Tom gave me a magnifying glass on a chain, for the really faded ones. Someone had brought tea in real cups, not paper. "How old?" asked Marcus, the youngest volunteer. 73, I said. "Good vintage," he replied, and we all laughed. After cake, I returned to my letters, finding birthday wishes across centuries. The lighthouse daughter wrote about her 35th birthday, spent preserving plums and wondering if life's sweetness increased with age or if we just learned to taste it better. Both, I wrote in the margin of my notes. Definitely both. The afternoon train home was full of students, backpacks, and energy spilling into aisles. I found a window seat and watched the familiar landscape scroll past, each view known but not worn out. At my stop, I gathered my things and stepped onto the platform just as the sun broke through the clouds. Home waited, tidy and welcoming. I'd left lights on timers, so windows glowed warm against October dusk. The marigolds had reached full glory, a river of gold along the property line. Everything in its place, including me. I changed into comfortable clothes, made tea, and sat at the kitchen table with the journal my son had given me. Time to write today's entry. 73. The museum gave me cake. The train ran on time. Tonight I'll eat dinner alone by choice, not default. The difference matters. Everything blooms in its season, including women who thought their flowering was finished. Especially them. The doorbell rang as I finished writing. Through the peephole, my son, Susan, and both grandchildren. My son held a cake box, Susan carried flowers, and the teenagers looked only slightly reluctant. I opened the door. "You rang." "We did," my son said. "Is it a good time?" "It is," I said, and meant it. "Come in." They filed into my kitchen, suddenly formal in the space they'd once taken for granted. Susan set the flowers, chrysanthemums, autumn colors, in the center of the table. My son produced plates from the correct cupboard, remembering. "We wanted to wish you a happy birthday," he said. "Properly." With notice, Susan added, almost smiling. "And cake," my grandson said. "Though you probably already had some." "There's always room for more cake," I said. We sat around the table, 5 people practicing new patterns. The cake was chocolate, my favorite, from the good bakery downtown. Conversation came in careful doses, museum news, school updates, the garden's progress. When silence fell, it wasn't uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. "I've been thinking," my son said eventually. "About those letters you catalog. The Lighthouse family. What about them? Do they ever visit each other? The mothers and daughters?" "Sometimes," I said. "Not often. Travel was hard then. But they kept writing. For 40 years. He nodded slowly. "Distance and connection aren't opposites." "No," I agreed. "They're dance partners." Susan surprised me then. "I'd like to see the museum sometime. If visitors are allowed." "They are," I said. "Thursdays are best. I could show you the collection." "I'd like that." They stayed another hour, until the teenagers' homework called them home. At the door, my granddaughter hugged me tight. "Happy birthday, Gran. Thanks for teaching me to ring." "Thanks for learning," I said. After they left, I stood in my doorway watching taillights disappear. The evening air smelled of rain coming and leaves turning. Mrs. Chen's porch light clicked on, our signal for all is well. I waved, though I couldn't see her, knowing she watched from somewhere. Inside, I cleared the cake plates, saved the flowers, and turned off the lights one by one. The house settled into its nighttime quiet, just me and the clock and the satisfaction of a birthday spent in chosen ways with chosen people. In bed, I thought about the lighthouse keeper's wife and her letters full of daily grace. How she'd made beauty from isolation, purpose from routine, connection from words sent across water. We weren't so different, she and I. Both of us learning late that solitude wasn't loneliness if you chose it, that boundaries weren't walls if you built them with doors. Tomorrow would come with its museum work, lunch with Tom, and letters to catalog. But tonight, there was just this, a woman in her own bed, in her own house, with her own keys and her own plans and her own story still being written. Not an ending. A beginning, 73 years in the making. The next morning brought the letter I'd been expecting. Official envelope, bank logo, MS. Rodriguez's precise handwriting. The trust was fully executed. Harrison from the bank would serve as co-trustee, neutral, professional, protective. The listening bench fund was established. Everything is clear, documented, and decided. I filed the papers in the lilac-tabbed binder, then made a new list. Things accomplished. Locks that lock. Work that matters. Family who knock. Friends who lunch. Garden that blooms. Stories preserved. Boundaries that breathe. At the museum, I shared the news with Helen. A listening bench? She said. I love that. For the library garden. Somewhere, people can sit with their stories. May I make a suggestion? We have a sister program with the library, Oral Histories. Perhaps your bench could be part of that. A place for recording stories, not just thinking them. Yes, I said immediately. That's perfect. We spent lunch break sketching possibilities. Tom joined us, adding practical thoughts about weather-resistant recording equipment and protective covers. By the time we returned to our letters, the bench had grown from a simple donation to a community project. You're building something, Tom said as we packed up that afternoon. We're building something, I corrected. Want to help? Thought you'd never ask. That weekend, I met with the library director. Williams was younger than my daughter would have been, with eyes that understood the weight of untold stories. We walked through the garden, looking for the right spot. Here, she said finally, stopping at a curve in the path where two trees created a natural shelter. Protected but not hidden. Private but not isolated. Perfect, I agreed. We discussed design, funding, and the oral history program that could use the bench as a home base. My donation would cover the bench and initial equipment. The library would maintain it, train volunteers, and preserve the stories collected. We'll put a plaque, MS. Williams said. Would you like your name on it? Just small, I said. The bench matters more than the name. She smiled. How about the listening bench, where stories rest? With your name as donor and smaller text below? Yes, I said. That's right. We shook hands like women completing important business. Walking home, I felt the satisfaction of seeds planted well. Not just marigolds marking borders, but something that would bloom long after I was done blooming myself. At home, I found a note tucked into my door. Gran rang but you weren't home. Having adventures? Call me. Your favorite granddaughter, the only one. I called. She answered on the second ring. Where were you? She asked. I brought cookies. Library business, I said. Bring them tomorrow. I'll make tea. What kind of library business? I told her about the bench, the oral history project, and the idea of creating space for stories to be heard. She was quiet for a moment, then, could I interview you? For the collection? Me? You have stories. The museum, the letters, the whole changing the locks thing. It's like you became yourself at 73. 73 and a half, I corrected. And yes. I'd like that. We made plans for Sunday afternoon. She'd bring her phone to record, I'd make the good tea, and we'd sit in the garden if the weather allowed. My story joins all the others, ordinary and extraordinary at once. That night, I pulled out the journal and wrote. Today I funded a bench. Not a memorial, a listening post. The difference matters. Memorial benches hold the past. Listening benches hold the possibility. Both needed, but I'm not done with the possibility yet. November arrived with serious rain and the last of the marigolds. I spent a morning cutting them back, saving seeds for next year. Mrs. Chen helped, both of us muddy-kneed and content. Good boarders make good neighbors, she said, surveying our work. Robert Frost, I said. And us, she added. We're proving it. At the museum, the lighthouse letters were nearly complete. I'd catalogued 3 generations of women writing across distance, their words preserved and accessible. Helen started me on a new collection, women's diaries from the 1920s, full of jazz and worry and hemlines rising like hope. Tom and I had expanded our Thursday lunches to include Marcus and 2 other volunteers. We called ourselves the Archive Gang, though we were possibly the least gang-like group in existence. Still, it felt good to belong to something chosen. My daughter's coming for Thanksgiving, Tom mentioned one Thursday. First time since her mother died. I'm nervous. About what? I asked. Getting it wrong. The meal, the conversation, the whole thing. Then get it wrong, I said. Together. That's what family does, mess up and try again. He smiled. Your family still adjusting to the new you? Every day. But at least now there's something real to adjust to. The Sunday interview with my granddaughter went deeper than expected. She asked real questions, waited through my pauses, didn't rush the silences where truth gathered itself. We sat in the garden despite the chill, wrapped in quilts with tea steaming between us. When did you know things had to change? She asked. When I heard myself called a bother while standing 3 feet away. But really, I'd known for years. That was just the moment I couldn't unknow it anymore. Were you scared? Terrified. But more scared of disappearing completely. What's the hardest part? I thought about this. Staying changed. It's easy to slip back into old patterns, especially when people expect them. Every day I have to choose a new way. And the best part? This, I said. Sitting here with you because we both chose it. Knowing you rang the bell because you wanted to see me, not because you needed something. Having work that matters and friends who lunch and a door that locks when I need it to. She asked about the letters, the museum, and the listening bench. I told her about the lighthouse keeper's wife and her daughter, about Tom's sandwiches, about learning to be alone without being lonely. She recorded it all, occasionally asking follow-up questions that showed she was really listening. Last question, she said finally. What would you tell someone who's thinking about changing their own locks? That it's not about the locks, I said. It's about deciding you're worth protecting. Worth knowing. Worth the effort of a real relationship. The locks are just the beginning. She turned off the recording and sat back in her chair. Thanks, Gran. This is exactly what the Oral History Project needs. Stories about stubborn old women? Stories about women choosing themselves. At any age. We packed up as dusk gathered. At the door, she hugged me extra long. I'm proud of you, she said. For changing the locks. For all of it. I'm proud of us, I said. For finding our way to this. December came with its early dark and promise of endings that were really beginnings. The listening bench was installed on a Tuesday, Tom and I taking long lunches to attend the small ceremony. It was beautiful, solid wood with curved arms, brass plaque catching winter light. Williams had added a small weatherproof box for recording equipment and instructions. First story? She asked, holding out the recorder. Tom should go first, I said. He has maritime tales. But Tom shook his head. Your bench, your first story. So I sat on the bench I'd funded, in the garden that would outlive me, and told a simple story about marigolds and boundaries and learning to bloom late. When I finished, Tom told me about finding purpose in old papers. Then Ms. Williams shared why libraries mattered to her. 3 stories to christen the bench, with thousands more to come. Walking back to the museum, Tom said, that felt important. Small important, I agreed. The best kind. The family dynamics continued their slow evolution. Susan came to the museum, spent 2 hours reading lighthouse letters, and left with tears she didn't explain. My son started calling Sunday evenings, real conversations about work, weather, and what we were reading. The grandchildren found their own rhythms of visiting, each relationship its own shape. Christmas approached with less dread than usual. We'd agreed to Christmas Eve dinner at my house, planned, not assumed. I'd cook the main dish, and they'd bring sides. Everyone would leave by 9 because I had museum work the next morning, a lie, but a boundary-keeping one. You're working Christmas? Susan had asked. Half day, I'd said. The letters don't catalog themselves. She'd started to protest, then stopped. Progress. The week before Christmas, I finished the Lighthouse collection. The last letter was from the daughter to her own daughter, 50 years after the first one. She wrote, "Distance taught us to love with intention. Every letter is a choice, every visit is a gift. We might have been closer in miles and farther in understanding. Instead, we chose the harder thing, knowing each other's true selves." I catalogued it carefully, filed it with its sisters, and closed the box. Helen found me there, crying quietly over women I'd never met but felt I knew. They do that, she said. The letters make you feel less alone in history. Yes, I said. Exactly that. Christmas Eve came clear and cold. I cooked all day, not frantically but with pleasure. The turkey roasted while I made my mother's stuffing. Pies cooled on the counter. The house smelled like memory and possibility mixed. They arrived promptly at 5, arms full of dishes and decent wine. We'd found our rhythm over the months, how to be family without assumption, how to share space without taking it. Dinner conversation flowed more easily now, probably because we'd all learned to listen better. Remember last Christmas? My grandson asked. When we just showed up and you were still in your bathrobe? I remember, I said. This is better, he said. More real. Real is harder, Susan said, surprising everyone. But yes, better. After dinner, my granddaughter helped with the dishes while the others sorted leftovers. She told me about using the listening bench for a school project, collecting stories from elderly neighbors about their first jobs. One woman was a telephone operator in 1962, she said. She remembered every regular's voice, could connect calls by feel. She said the hardest part was keeping secrets, all those conversations flowing through her hands. Like the lighthouse letters, I said. Private words looking for safe harbor. I'm going to study library science, she announced. Like you, but official. I just catalog letters, I said. You save stories, she corrected. That's library science. They left at 9 as promised, hugs all around, plans made for New Year's lunch, reservation required. I stood at my door watching them go, then turned back to my quiet house. Not empty, full of chosen peace. I made tea, sat with my journal, wrote. Christmas Eve, year 1 of the new way. They came when invited, left when planned. We ate and talked and knew each other a little better. The lighthouse keeper's daughter was right, distance teaches intentional love. Sometimes you have to step back to see clearly, lock doors to open hearts, say no to finally mean yes. The listening bench project grew through winter. Stories collected like snow, quiet at first, then accumulating into something substantial. I volunteered one afternoon a week, teaching people how to use the equipment, how to ask questions that opened rather than closed. The work felt like an extension of the museum, preserving voices instead of letters. One February afternoon, I found my son sitting on the bench, recorder in hand, but not on. "Practicing?" I asked. "Thinking," he said. "About stories I never asked Dad for. Questions I saved for later that ran out of time." I sat beside him. The bench was good for two, designed for conversation. "He would have liked this," my son said. The bench. He always said everyone had at least one good story. He was right. "I never asked yours," he said. "Your real stories. Just assumed I knew them because I was there for part." "You can ask now," I said. He turned on the recorder. "Tell me about the locks," he said. "The real reason, not the one you gave us at first." So I told him. About feeling invisible in my own life. About the moment at the gate. About choosing to matter to myself first. He listened without interrupting, sometimes nodding, once reaching for my hand. When I finished, he asked, "What did you think would happen when you changed them?" "I thought you might never come back," I admitted. "But I decided that was better than you never really seeing me when you did come." "I see you now," he said quietly. "Maybe for the first time." "I see you too," I said. "Also for the first time." We sat in comfortable silence, winter sun weak but present. Then he asked another question, and another, collecting stories of my childhood, my work years, the time before I was mom or grandma. An hour of careful archaeology, digging up the person beneath the roles. When we finished, he turned off the recorder and hugged me. "Thank you," he said. "For the stories. For the locks. For teaching us how to know you." "Thank you for learning," I said. Spring came early that year, crocuses pushing through February snow like purple promises. I planted new marigolds from saved seeds, the line of them familiar now, part of the landscape. Mrs. Chen and I added vegetables this time, tomatoes, peppers, and beans that would climb the new trellises. At the museum, I'd moved on to Depression-era diaries, women making do and making meaning from scarcity. Their words felt timely, about finding abundance in constraint, beauty in boundaries. I'd started giving talks about the collections, sharing what I'd learned about women's words across centuries. "You're a natural teacher," Helen said after one presentation. "Just a good listener," I said. "The letters do the teaching." My 74th birthday approached with less fanfare but more substance. I planned my own celebration, morning at the museum, lunch with the archive gang, afternoon on the listening bench collecting stories, dinner with family, properly scheduled, lovingly anticipated. The night before my birthday, I sat with my journal, taking stock. Almost 74. In 1 year, changed locks, found work, made friends, planted gardens, funded a bench, saved stories, learned family can evolve. Lost, false harmony, exhausting availability, the confusion of access with love. Gained, chosen solitude, real connection, work that matters, boundaries that breathe. The math comes out ahead. The birthday itself dawned bright. I woke without an alarm, made good coffee, and ate breakfast while watching birds argue at the feeder. Simple pleasures, but mine to savor. At the museum, Tom had organized a proper celebration. Cake in the break room, but also a gift. They'd found a lighthouse keeper's journal from 1895, companion to the letters I'd catalogued. "For your special collection," Helen said. "The one you're building on women's daily courage." I opened it carefully. His handwriting described the same storms his wife had written about, but from different angles. Two views of the same life, finally reunited. "It's perfect," I said, meaning more than the gift. Lunch with the archive gang had evolved into a monthly tradition, but today was special. Marcus had made his grandmother's soup, Tom brought wine, and others contributed dishes from their heritage. We ate in the museum garden, telling stories about worst birthdays and best ones, about aging and finding purpose, and the way time moved differently in archives. To another year of saving stories, Tom toasted. To stories that save us, I countered. That afternoon, I sat on the listening bench with my granddaughter. She'd brought a proper camera this time, wanting to document the bench's first year for a school project. How many stories so far? She asked. Over 200, I said. Everything from first jobs to last words, immigration tales to love stories, recipes explained and grudges released. Which one's your favorite? The one being told right now, I said. Always that one. She smiled, understanding. Want to record another? For the birthday collection? So I told her about being 74 and still beginning. About the museum and the letters and the way Tom's friendship had grown like the garden, steady, seasonal, sustaining. About Susan learning to see me and my son learning to ask. About the way boundaries had made everything bigger, not smaller. You sound happy, she observed when I finished. I am, I said. Not perfect happy. Real happy. The kind with edges and weather and roots. That evening, family dinner unfolded with the ease of practiced steps. We'd found our rhythm over the year, how to gather without crowding, how to care without controlling. The teenagers told school stories, Susan shared news from her book club, and my son asked about the museum's new acquisition. Dad's journal? He said when I explained. The lighthouse keeper? The same family. His words, her words, now together in the archive. Like the bench, he said. Bringing voices together. Exactly like that. After cake, chocolate again, tradition now, my granddaughter pulled out a wrapped box. From all of us, she said. But mostly from me because I had the idea. Inside, a leather-bound journal, much like the one from last year, but with a difference. The first page had an inscription, for the stories you're living. With love and respect, your family who knocks. Look closer, she urged. Each family member had written something on subsequent pages. Not long letters, just thoughts, memories, appreciation. My son wrote about learning to see. Susan about understanding boundaries as love. The grandchildren appreciate the gift of being welcomed rather than assumed. We thought you should have our stories too, my granddaughter explained. For your collection. I couldn't speak for a moment. Then, this is the best gift. All of it. The whole year. The year you changed the locks, my grandson said. And everything else. The year we all changed, Susan corrected, and for once, she was exactly right. They left at the agreed time, each hug deliberate and warm. I stood at my door watching them go, then turned back to my house, tidy, peaceful, entirely mine. Not lonely. Full. Before bed, I wrote in the new journal. 74. The locks still work. So do the boundaries, the job, the friendships, the family we're becoming. Tomorrow I'll catalog more letters, tend the garden, maybe sit on the listening bench, and collect another story. Small work, daily work, the work of being human with intention. Once, they said, don't bother coming to the gate. Now they ring the bell and wait to be welcomed. We all do. That's the difference. That's everything. I closed the journal, turned off the lights, and headed to bed. Through the window, moonlight caught the marigolds, row after row of golden sentinels. Beautiful boundaries, blooming in their season. Not the end of the story. Just the place where one chapter closes and another begins, with keys in my pocket and tomorrow's work waiting. The lighthouse keeper's wife would understand. Some stories don't end, they just keep teaching new readers how to live. If this story found you at the right time, share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to change the locks. Never too late to plant marigolds. Never too late to choose yourself first, so you can choose others better. The gate swings both ways now. That makes all the difference.